Well, British Columbia is shutting down the idea of a new pipeline from Alberta to the province's northern coast. It's a pitch. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she's taking to the major projects office. And now a former Alberta Premier has weighed in on BC's opposition. Some scathing words from Jason Kenney, who said yesterday that BC Premier David Eby is a bigger threat to Confederation than Alberta separatists.
The reason I say he's a bigger threat, I don't think the Alberta separatists, the hardcore separatists, are actually a serious threat. I think they're a very small minority. But this is a BC Premier using his office to violate and threaten the Constitution and to say to patriotic Albertans and Saskatchewan residents that he's going to try to use his political authority against the clear letter of the Constitution to block provinces from exporting what they produce, which is undermining the entire premise of Confederation.
And BC's Energy Minister Adrian Dix joins me now. Adrian Dix, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here today, sir.
Great to be on the show, David.
Let's set aside for a second, there is no private sector proponent for a pipeline, and it is still in the concept phase. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith believes that you and your government will eventually come around to the benefits of such a project. Is that the case? Does she have a hope here?
Well, it's more than that. There's no proponent, which means there's no business case, right? Which is important. There's no possibility of take-or-pay contracts, which would be essential to it going forward. And so from our perspective, we believe that this project, when you look at the north coast of BC, where enormous economic development is happening, and there's even more potential in the future, potential that benefits not just us, but Alberta as well, that the social license we have to proceed with things like LNG, $50 billion in projects under construction, another potential $50 billion ahead of us on the capital side for projects. All the work at the Port of Prince Rupert, all the things we're doing on the North Coast is based on, the tanker bound is foundational to the consensus we've developed around those questions. So these are important questions for us. So yes, it's important that there's no proponent, there's no project, there's no route, and all of those, and the development of all of the route would be controversial and problematic for our economy, but also I'd say there are better options, including ones that Alberta knows well about, of increasing the capacity on the TMX pipeline. There's excess capacity potentially at relatively low cost in the Enbridge pipeline. So our point is that this is a lot of disruption to other projects for a project that is only in the theory stage at this point.
No, look, and I do appreciate that, and the other options, certainly the TMX one, I'm less familiar with the specifics of the Enbridge one, but that would increase capacity by 200,000 to 300,000 barrels a day, as I understand it, and the pipeline she's advocating for would be about 1 million. So the scale is quite different. So she is determined to get it to the point that it moves beyond theoretical, right? Sorry. Go ahead.
But David, also, that's a project that's about $3 to $4 billion in cost, not 50 to 60 billion, right?
Sure.
One. And two, none of that has gone through anyone. To have $1 billion, you have to have buyers. And of course, if you go these other routes, you have significantly lower cost options. The TMX pipeline was built with public funds, as we all know, ultimately. It's something we all own. There's talk about it making money, but of course it only makes money because the majority of the debt has been taken over by the federal government and is essentially a benefit to TMX. So it's our pipeline and we own it. Our position is, why don't we use it to the full? And that means right now it's on average about 100,000 barrels of capacity unused right now.
Right.
Why don't we use it to the full? Wouldn't that be a good idea that would build national unity and bring people together and not have all the issues related to a theoretical proposal, which we believe, of course, won't happen.
But she is trying, the Premier, obviously, to move it beyond the theoretical, right? That's the point of this entire exercise. So, look, I know your answer will be that there isn't a proponent, there isn't a business case, there isn't this, but help me understand exactly the specifics of the BC position. Is that you're opposed to the idea of a pipeline, or would you actively work to stop it and work against it should a proponent come forward to go to the Northwest Coast?
Well, our job is to promote economic growth in BC and in Canada, and to lead Canada in terms of economic growth, which I think we're doing. Our projects all have proponents here, first of all. Our job is to protect BC's coast and to advocate for the people who live there and the economy that lives there, and the First Nations and all people that live on the North Coast. That's our job. Our job is to advocate for our economy and advocate for our coast, and that's exactly what we're doing in this case. If this was an Alberta project, I mean, the reason that people are asking us about this project, we understand, is that the majority of the project would be in British Columbia.
Right.
So we do have a voice in these questions, and we're expressing that voice because it's our job to create wealth here and to support, of course, the creation of wealth everywhere. And that's why we propose the project we propose, and that's why we're laying down what our views are on this proposal as well.
But you know, as we learned through TMX, ultimately the federal government, should it get behind a pipeline project that crosses borders, can force it through. It does have that authority. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is it just a rhetorical opposition to the idea of a bitumen pipeline to Prince Rupert or somewhere in that area, or would you take actual legal and political action against it?
Well, of course, just to remember on the TMX question, the key question there was financial as well. The federal government bought it for, I don't know, in the neighborhood of $5 billion. It ended up costing $34 billion. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Trudeau and the government effectively took on $40 billion in debt. That was the key question, right? So all Canadians paid for that, made that happen. And we saw in 23 and 24 about a 300% increase in oil transfers from Alberta through British Columbia, primarily going to China and the United States, right? That's what we saw.
Right.
And that's happened, and we should maximize that. You say they have the right to force it through. In that case, you say they have the right to force it through. They didn't force it through in that case. They paid for it with taxpayers' dollars, right?
Yes, but it was opposed by former Premier Horgan, right?
In this case, though, Prime Minister Carney and Mr. Hodgson, and indeed Premier Smith, have all said that won't happen in this case.
Right.
There won't be public money. This won't be a
Right.
public money proposal that's being put forward, right? And in addition to that, the Prime Minister, I think, has said we also need to do another multi-tens of billions of dollars of project in the Pathways project as a prerequisite for this happening in the view of the federal government. So they're making that case. And we're making the case for British Columbia, which is more than just a rhetorical case, that we're going to do what we need to do to support our economic ventures, to support projects like mining and critical minerals and LNG in the Port of Prince Rupert, and to make them happen because they're real. And I think a lot of people are trying to frame this as a national unity question, right? If it's a national unity question, let's deal with things that are concrete and real and exist in time and space,
Right.
not have a theoretical debate. We're here to help Alberta and to help everybody else in Canada. And we've demonstrated that on the other projects that I've talked about. And we're going to continue to do that. But we're going to advocate for BC. It's our job to defend our economy, to support economic development here, and to defend our coast.
Well, I mean, it may become a real thing if the referendum goes ahead next year, but we'll see, and we'll talk about that if it happens. But look, Danielle Smith has been diplomatic on things, saying she hopes to convince you, hopes to convince the Premier, hopes to convince the First Nations along the Northwest Coast. Her predecessor, Jason Kenney, was far less diplomatic. He was on the show last night. He put out a tweet saying that David Eby is objectively a much bigger threat to Confederation and to the rule of law than Alberta separatists. He said Eby belonged to what he called the mud hut wing of green extremists in your party, a phrase he attributed to John Horgan, and called the Premier an ideological zealot. I mean, what do you make of those comments from Jason Kenney? What do you think it does to this conversation?
Well, it's amazing when people become commentators, you know, and depend on clickbait and making provocative statements. I think we need less of that and more working together in Canada, frankly. And I'm not going to respond to Premier Kenney's name calling. Let me just say this. When the NDP came to office in BC, there were no LNG projects, none, no FIDs. We're now 14 shipments to Asia of LNG, 50 billion in projects under construction, and tens of billions of more coming online. So that tells you the kind of problems we want to bring. We're building the North Coast transmission line that will open up opportunities for mining in the northwest of the province in a visionary way similar to the 1960s when another government, the W.A.C. Bennett government, nationalized BC Electric and built dams that the private sector in that case wouldn't build. We have project after project after project. Our projects are private sector projects. And with great respect to Mr. Kenney and everyone else, We are also working with Alberta on important things that are in their interest. So, I mean, in fact, what Mr. Kenney said is complete nonsense and name calling. And it's the kind of thing that might work in the Trump administration, but I don't think will work in Canada.
Do you worry, just as a final point, Minister, that we saw David Eby say, don't mistake my politeness for weakness, as he got, animated by Premier Eby's standards. He was quite frustrated with all of this. And now you see this kind of language from Jason Kenney. Are you worried this sparks an interprovincial fight at a time when, for the most part, the First Minister's table has been working pretty well together?
I'm not interested in any fights. And that's why we're working, for example, with TMX on their proposal.
Right.
And I don't know how Jason Kenney would characterize that, but it's in the benefit, primarily that project, of Alberta. But it involves, by the way, British Columbia Resources, British Columbia Hydro, because that's necessary to the project, and other things. So from the beginning of my time as Minister of Energy, I've been open to working with Alberta, and we're working together on lots of things. And so we have to continue to do this and bring the country together. And so my point to everybody out there is no proponent, no project, but lots of division. Maybe that's not being very helpful either.
BC Energy Minister Adrian Dix, we appreciate the time, sir.
Great to be on the show, David. Hope to see you again soon.
I have a feeling we'll be calling you. Thank you, sir.
I love it. Talk about our projects.